Second now. All right. Oh, we are live at exactly 30 and 00. So welcome to the Live Coding Happy Hour for December 2nd, 2016. I am Dave Slusher. I'm joined by my colleagues Chuck Tomasi and Josh Nerius. And welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Let's go around the horn and give our brief bio. Josh, let's start with you.
Sure. So I am a developer evangelist in the developer program here at ServiceNow, and I write lots of blog posts and sample apps and do live coding happy hours on Fridays.
All right. And Chuck?
I am a platform architect in the platform practice team, and I do POVs for customers, custom app development, integrations, mobile, encryption. If you name it, if it's got something to do with trying to sell a platform license, I'm probably behind it in some way, shape, or form.
All right, and I'm Dave Slusher. I'm also, I work with Josh as a developer evangelist in the platform business unit. And we create content, and a lot of that is around the Istanbul release, which has just gone early access. So if you go to developer.servicenow.com, which is kind of our domain, if you go there, you can get your developer instance, and they are upgradable to Istanbul at this moment. So let's give because we sent out a newsletter earlier this week, and we've got I think we might have some new subscribers. I'm going to give a quick rundown of what we're doing here with the Live Coding Happy Hour. This is basically something that kind of the three of us came up with as the antithesis of all of us go into webinar demo type situations. And we spend the time to make a slick demo. And a lot of times we have realized that essentially everything we cut out of that demo was in fact a lot of the value. And so as people who build things and with an audience of people who build things for a living on the ServiceNow platform, we wanted to kind of show how we do the job and kind of show warts and all what we do as we build things. So kind of what we do is we get on here and we are actually, in almost every case, we're building like live stuff that we're working on, and we're just showing you how we do it, talking through our thought process, not guaranteed to get working code, not guaranteed to get bug-free code. In some cases, we're just exploring things that we're not that familiar with. And in fact, in this case, let me tell you a little about the format of this one. This is kind of a different show. We actually changed topics fairly late in the game. Josh and I were talking about something earlier this week, and here's the use case. The problem is when you've got a scoped application that you're developing and you've got source code integration, almost everything about that makes your life so wonderful, except for the point when you pull in the changes from the repository. And the way that works is it uninstalls your application and it reinstalls your application at the next point up in the commit tree. So then what happens is your data is somewhere between scrambled in the best case or gone in the worst case. And so it is particularly one of the use cases is we do these webinar things, and Josh is actually working on a webinar where we're using Git branches and Git tags to fast forward through the demo. But every time you do that, you get rid of all your demo data, which in a webinar situation is an enormous problem.
Yeah, Dave, can we put a qualifier on that? Not all of the data is gone. If it's user table, your users are intact. If it's the data,
right? The data of your tables are getting uninstalled. Essentially like any table in your application, right, is getting dropped and restored, and that data disappears. Not your whole instance. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. Your instance is not wiped, but your application data can be wiped.
It is a good distinction, though. Yep.
And so what we said is we talked about a way to do this, like essentially a data preserver for your demo data, in your application that you're developing. So we actually had two concepts, and we were kind of kicking it around which way was better. And we came up with the idea, let's do it both ways, and then let's see which one we like better. And then we would say, let's compare them, let's bring them together for the Live Coding Happy Hour, make some decisions about what we like better, and then we'll do it a third time, kind of on the air. Now, spoiler alert. I'm going to jump straight to the end of mine. Mine crashed and burned. Mine failed spectacularly. And I'll show you kind of what I have. I'll do mine super fast. We had a structural problem in the John, and it really kind of broke my spirit because it was so good. I thought, oh no.
Solutions often are.
Oh, and then when I started doing it, I realized that like the basic, I was 20 minutes in when I knew it was not going to work. Because and by the way, I started using the acronym DPOC, which is disproof of concept, which is good to figure out early on that your thing is just not going to work. So we had two ways we were going to go, and Josh will show you his. I was thinking about using an import set, like setting up a static import set with a set of data, and then using that, basically invoking that. So we were going to, both of our solutions involved using a script action to respond to the event that happens when you do a source control update, which is the same event as when you upgrade a plugin. It generates that. The parameter 1 in that event is the name of your scope. That's what reuses that event for scoped applications. So that we're great. We'll have a script action. And I said, I'll just have a generic thing with a table. And let me go ahead and share one. Why am I not sharing?
Before you do.
Yeah. Oh, we skipped an important part of live coding happy hour. Yes.
It is happy hour.
All right. Let's go around the horn. Chuck, what are you drinking?
I am non-alcoholic today. I'm having a nice warm apple cider under doctor's orders today.
All right, Josh.
I have, I'm not actually drinking Chicago beer. It's the Poet from New Holland, based out of Michigan. It's an oatmeal stout, and I have a glass too.
I have a dad mug.
Still the upper Midwest, though.
Yeah,
Josh is representing his region. All right, I'm drinking a Ballast Point Dead Ringer Oktoberfest brew. Frankly, I don't like these much. I can tell you right now that my not going to give it a great rating, but I need to get rid of them. So, plowing through them.
Wait for company to come over and serve it.
It's so nice and dark.
I just don't love this, but it is what it is. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. Let me go ahead and lock this to me. So, like I said, I'm just going to blast through mine because it just didn't work. So my idea was to have the script action, and so the script action is responding to this plugin upgraded. Is that big enough for you guys to read? Do I need to up it one? Okay. So it's responding to that. Then we're going to get the parameter, which is the scope name, and then I was going to have another table that essentially is very simple and only has two real columns, which is mapping an import set to a scope name. So for every for the scope, you can have a number of import sets that you want to invoke when it happens. And the reason I wanted to go import set is because it got around some of the scope problems in the pre-show where we're kind of discussing the scope problems. That there are some trickiness. If you've got the preserver is a scoped app, now it's got to be able to have access to read and write to all the applications. And I thought, import set, we can get around that. In fact, the import set, I have not used import sets a lot. And that's also a reason to do it, right? In these happy hours, a lot of times I will pick whatever the option is I've never done, just so I can kind of get my feet wet with it. Mm-hmm. And what I did not realize is like how intrusive the import set is, and like how it doesn't really work. This is actually like the worst case use case for it, right? It works pretty well for a one-time file upload type import, and it works well for a live type import from LDAP that you're going to do on a schedule, where you've got a resource out there. But for a file upload that happens periodically, it actually just doesn't work very well. It's hard to invoke. There's not good APIs for it. And then it actually has to create these tables, which I didn't think through when I said, oh, let's use an update set. All right, an import set. I didn't think about the fact that it has to create a table, and then that table has to live in a scope somewhere, and it's just a mess. So my idea was to have this generic script action that's the thing that didn't work. But that would invoke this script include, and all the script include would be to loop over all. You call it and you say run this import set, and so it would basically loop over that table. Say for this scope, find me all the mapped, look for this scope, find me all the mapped import sets and run them. And in fact, it just didn't work. So I have to kind of lay down my arms and surrender that I liked the generic approach. I liked the fact that you would use the import set and you got around all that stuff. But in practice, it did not work. It would be too intrusive to have to create this import set for everything. And if you had a big application with a lot of data, just creating it is a problem. So mine, I just didn't. I tried, failed. It turns out that this is just not a good case for that. So with that, let's hand it over to Josh, who has a killer, impressive solution.
We'll see if it's impressive. Let's see here if I can figure out how to share. And also, we had a comment from the chat that the screen resolution was too small. So we're going to try to see if we can fix this. Bear with me one moment. I have lost my window.
All right. Well, you're looking for that. I'm going to ask the question for you, Dave and Josh. Did you give any thought to using the unload XML functionality? Say, take this table and maybe even related lists to that and dump it to an XML, so you could easily just re-import the XML later?
That is similar to what I actually did.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'll talk about that and let me know. Are you able to see my screen? Okay.
Yes. We
And
will
I'm
need
gonna.
You're able to see it. Let me lock it to you.
All right. And I'm gonna see if I can
Should be locked.
zoom
to
this
you.
way up here.
And in fact, we should be hidden now.
embiggen.
All right.
That I can read. That might be a little large to get a
Yeah.
But this
That's
is
fine.
Istanbul, so you can slide the you can
Oh yeah.
slide the rider around.
I can make that go away. It's a beautiful thing. I'm so happy I can use Istanbul now. So, I guess what I'll do is I'll first show what the sort of the end experience looks like. And there are a couple of steps that we can go through here for kind of the remainder of this. One is I'm going to show you what we did, but then I implemented this as a global app. And ultimately, I don't want a global app to be sort of the final approach. I would like to have this be a scope.
Yeah, you just went to full screen. Can you make the font a little larger now? I was gonna say we had a lot of unused real estate before.
Yep.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Okay, perfect. So what this looks like is if we go and look for this thing called Data Preserver, I have sort of 3 levels of configuration. I have this idea of a project, and I'm just going to create one here. And I'm going to say that this project is called rental thingy, because I don't have a better name for it. And I'm going to associate it with an app that's already in the system. And what this is doing is it's now going out there and it's saying, we've got a pointer to this application. And now within this application, we can create what are called preservers. And a preserver is going to be associated with a particular table inside the app. So I'm just going to call this one rental properties. And we'll select rental property. And then if I save this, what this now does is we have the ability to back up all the records, restore all the records that are in that source table. So I'm just going to click that. And what this actually does, and I'll get into the code and we're going to dig into this a lot more. But this actually will go out to the rental property table and it's going to take each of those records. It's going to say, turn this into a payload. So what table is it in? What's its sysid? Turn this thing into a JSON representation of that. And I'll tell you why I want JSON route and not the XML unload in a few minutes.
Just ask that. It's a little easier to read to my eyes.
It is a little easier to read for sure. And I think ultimately this is going to help us get it into a scoped application as well.
And that got all the attributes. I mean, we're talking the fields, the sys created. So theoretically, when you restore this, it will come back exactly the same, even the sysid. Yeah,
and I had to do some special stuff to make that work, because by default, when you try to do this, it's going to try to assign its own sysid, but we actually want to preserve the sysids, which is especially important if you've got data, referenced across tables, because you have to preserve the original sysids.
Yep.
So that's what it does. It goes in and collects these. You could, if I go out there now and let me just pull this up, rental properties, there's a bunch of data. I'll go ahead and delete it. I need a demo. Yeah, right. Will it work? I'll click restore all records. And let's see, did it work? Did it work? It did. They came right back. So instantaneously, we've got all of our data back. Now, of course, I'm showing you all this stuff, and I haven't showed you any of the code yet. So that's what I want to do now.
Yeah, what are you going to build here today? It looks like it's done.
Well, so it is, but the problem is this is global. It's not in source control, and I can't put it in source control because it's a global app. And that's not really how we want this in the future. So, it'd be much better if we could throw this out in a GitHub repo and let people go out there and check this thing out and import it.
Okay.
Without having to worry about global app. Plus, it's uninstallable that way. So there's some work we can do.
And Josh, talk a little bit about the scope issues that you ran into when you were doing this.
Yeah, so one of the things that comes up is most tables. So when you create a new table in a scope, it allows other scopes to read it, but it does not allow other scopes to write it. So
if you configure the table on this particular table, you can show the access tab.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just do that. Let's go configure table.
Every table has this. There's actually 2 levels of this. One is at the table level and the other is at the application level to say, do you want to just monitor this or do you want to enforce it? Because when you do this between 2 tables, it says, now I'm going to create a rule that says you are allowed to read from, table X is allowed to read from table Y, or table Y is allowed to write to table Z. So this is where you say, what am I going to allow in and out?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is the default. It's all application scopes can read, but you notice can create is not checked. So what that means is when you're creating your applications or you're creating tables in your applications, you can back them up, But if you want to restore the data automatically, you have to click can create. You have to go and check can create in order to allow that cross scope operation to actually work. So that's just something to keep in mind. But we can talk about potentially, I don't know if there are any workarounds to that. I don't think there are. I think that's just the way it works, but we can talk about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a scoped app and we're going to build this out. So let me do that now. And we're going to start by creating an application.
To, full screen mode, please, if you would.
Yep. I'm trying to, why is that not going? There we go.
There we are.
So we're going to call this data preserver. And I know there's already one out there already, but we're just going to call this data preserver and it's got a scope name, so it's not going to conflict. And let's start working on it. I'm going to move the other app out here so it's not in our way. Oh, no. There we go. One second. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we need a table to actually store references to our applications. And so I just called that project before. And I'm curious for input from you guys. I called this project, preserver, and record. I don't know if project is a good name for it.
Application?
Application. Yeah, that could work. That could work. Let's just call it application.
Yeah.
Well,
it's good.
This is what you're linking to, right? You're making a reference to the application.
It is a reference to the application, so that's fair. I think I can get on board with that.
How about scope? I'm just trying to think of something that's the problem being that all these terms are already exist in the system.
Right.
Yeah, something that qualifies it, just so that you don't accidentally pick. I've run into this where I create in one of our rental demo apps. My first cut, I named it property, and then I realized after a while, boy, that's a terrible name.
I've done that. Yep.
Yeah, it's easy to do. Easy to do. So, how about source application? How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'm going to do source application, and this is just going to have, man, the window on my other screen is so huge I can't see.
Oh, and you probably can't reduce one without reducing the other. You might have to set up another browser for that one.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So that's okay. That's okay. So let's just create this, and we're going to call the menu name data preserver.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll wait for that to do its thing. And then we want a couple of key columns. So we want to track what's the application.
Do we need a name if we already have the reference field?
We don't. And that's something that I think was kind of bad about my first implementation because it drove me nuts every time. So I'm just going to say that this is a reference, and it's a reference to the scope table. Or if I type in application, we should see it here, the syscope table.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that was interesting. You could do this to a couple of levels. So I think you could actually target the sys package table instead, and that would get global apps as well. I just didn't want to think about some of the potential implications of that right now.
And did you notice when you were picking that there were, I think, already 3 things in there that were called application?
That's a good
point.
Yeah.
4.
Good stuff to you.
Yeah, 3. In the CI and the scope, so that's just, so there was already multiple reuses of that, which is the sole reason why I wanted a disambiguating name.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
You don't use the navigation filter on the left menu to say system, or you get everything. Everything has a system in it somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second thing I had to do is I actually had to create a second field for scope that's a string. And the reason for this, I learned the hard way. When the app gets uninstalled as a part of your source code or your source control operation, the app goes away and it clears out the reference. So this particular record no longer has a reference to what it was backing up. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a string field to statically store the scope name itself, so that when it goes away, we can still point to something so that we can sync it back up, and I have a business rule to do that.
Okay,
so
makes
we'll
sense.
Get to that.
Good
so okay, we've got our source application. The next thing is we want to create the preserver table, which is what defines what table we're preserving. So how do you feel about the name preserver? I know we have a thing in the system called, there's some kind of data preserver in the system
When
already.
you clone, yeah. I think it's similar enough that the name is okay.
Yeah. And here's a good example of why your scope name can be a problem. So I'm just going to leave it like that for now. We may come back with an update to this later. So the key things that we want to keep track of in a preserver are the project that it's a reference to, or in this case, the source application. So we're going to say source application. This is a reference to our source application table. There we go. We want a source table. This is going to be a table name. And so this allows us to choose what table we're actually backing data up from. And then, let's see, do we need anything else right now? We can get into some of these other things later if we need to. So there we go. So we've got source table.
Maybe before you hit save on that, maybe a better name for this would be, I hate to say table, but because really what you're doing is defining the table that you're going to back up. So
table preserver.
Yeah, getting back to the table name where you have the preserver thing. What if you just cut and then you just left it as that works for me. How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, yeah, that works too. Cool. So we got those, and there's some special stuff we're gonna have to do with this source table, but I'll get into that in a minute. And just for consistency, let me do this.
Now you've made reference fields, so you're gonna have to define a display value on some of those too.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. I'm definitely gonna have to do that. So the first thing that I ran into, so I'm just gonna hop over to a main UI window here. We can take a look at these. And so we've got our table preservers. And, oh, that's interesting. Which one is this? So this is where we have fun because I have two copies of the app that I'm working on in my instance.
Yeah, I think your source applications may have gone to the wrong.
Yeah, let's take a look at these modules. So we've got source applications, and that needs to go to data preserver. It needs to go to the preserver menu.
Corey Searing says a workaround for overriding a table's cross-scope access policy would be a bug.
And that's a good point. That's a really good point.
He goes on to say, but you could throw up a notification after they create the new preserver reminding them to go change the access setting.
That's a good point too. Yeah, actually, I like that a lot. You
could have a little script and say, am I allowed to do this? If not, you say, please go fix this for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank you, Corey.
Yes, thank you very much. So at this point, we're going to create a source application record, and we've referenced our rental property application. The problem is we want to actually populate the scope, so I'm just going to build a business rule really quick to do that. And basically all this business rule is going to do is it's going to run this script that I'm copying. Advanced. Oh, there we go. So we're going to say current.scope is current.source application.scope.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to run this thing before insert and update. And we're going to call this populate scope. We're only going to run this when not current.application.nil.
Wouldn't you want it on a changes?
You probably would. Let me think about that.
Not that someone's going to come here and change it every day, but if they change, like let's say you have rules on your old application, but you still want to save the same tables, you could just change the application scope, and you'd want to make sure that gets updated.
This will run in both cases, though, right? So as long as, because it's not nil, so as long as this is not nil, if we change it, it should copy it over. And I think, did I get something wrong? I just called it application, that's why. we go. So let's try that one more time. That should go over. Oh. What am I doing, guys? So when to run? Oh, it's not running on any table. That's a that's a fun error.
Or we just throw up the hashtag.
Hashtag LCHH. This is what it's all about.
Or you could say you pulled a Chuck.
There we go. So that's exactly what we want. So we're actually pulling this over now. So we're now saying anytime we populate the application, we're going to save the scope because we want that later.
And let's look at that cross scope message right there.
Yeah.
People who have never seen that.
Yeah. And so what this is doing now is this is basically saying we're allowing access from the data preserver scope to see elements of scope glide element. So I'm actually curious, that must be because we're dot walking. Because we're dot walking in this script to current.application.scope, we're interacting with a scope glide element somewhere along the way. And so it's just letting us know that that's what we're doing. So cool. So the final thing we want in our data structure is a record. So we've got the ability to point to a particular table we want to preserve, but we actually have to preserve that data somewhere. So that's the final thing I'm going to create. Let's do one more table. And record. How's that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I like it.
Add module to menu preserver. Oh. And the things that we're going to keep track of here, I actually want a display value just so that we have sort of a friendly representation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be a string. We want a payload, which is also a string. And we're going to say that right off the bat, 65, 535, how's that?
Works for me.
We'll say a table. So we're actually tracking what table this is in. This is also going to be a string, and I'm not doing a table name because I forget why, but I think I had an issue because if the table doesn't exist, it doesn't show up nicely. So we just want a string representation of what that table is, and then a table sysid. And basically what we're doing here is we are storing a reference to the record so that we have an easy way to look it up. I'm going to make that 32.
And do you want to set your display value to display value?
You could. It's not. This table is not going to be referenced by anything, but you could.
Yeah, it's a good idea though. That's a good idea. You know, and there's something else that's key here that I didn't add. Let me add one more field, and this is a reference to the actual table preserver.
Oh
we
yeah.
have to tie it back to where did it come from?
What's going on? Yeah.
All right. So we got that. So we've got our 3 levels now of our data model. And at this point, it's just a matter of writing some code to actually populate this stuff. So I'm going to focus on, I think, sort of the core, the key piece, which is actually backing this stuff up. And within that, the way I'm going to do that is with a script include that I'm calling the data preserver backup. And let me just do a little bit of finagling off the screen that you can't see here for a moment.
Pay no attention to the magician.
And so we're going to create a script include. There we go. And get rid of some of these. There we go. And whoa, why is that happening? Every time I type Shift D, it's popping up that window.
You shortcut?
I don't know. Now it's working. All right. So data preserver backup, the purpose of this method or of this script include is really to handle the process of actually backing stuff up. I'm going to do a little bit of copying and pasting of code because I've already written this and you guys don't need to watch me type, but I'm going to talk through what it is. So when we initialize this thing, we actually want to pass in the sysid of the preserver that we're backing up from. And then we're going to actually get some references to that. So we're basically storing some information about what is it that we're backing up. The thing here, so we've got table, that's got to change because we have a new thing. And then let me pull in my get preserver method next. So we can sort of build this out. So we're passing in a preserver sys_id. We have a different table now. So it was DPR preserver before. Now it's data preserver table. I can't copy it.
Oh,
That's a Chrome thing. Here's what you can do, Josh. Scroll down or go to application access.
yeah. There's another.
Yeah, and you can copy the name from down there. Scroll down a little.
Ah, good call. Thank you, Dave.
I had to figure that workaround because that's a Chrome thing recently where if it's a read-only field, it won't let you copy, which to me is a usability bug. So,
yeah, that's hugely problematic. That's really bad. Not good at all. So what we're doing, we're getting a copy of this, and now we can start to do some work on that. Mm-hmm. Now, what I want to do is build a thing called backup records, and I'm going to just copy that in, talk through what it's doing. So what this is doing is it's saying, go out there and look for the table that's associated with this preserver, do a query. I'm doing a get row count here. I know, slap me on the wrist for that, but I'm actually iterating over through the whole thing.
That's not a sin if you're doing something with it anyway.
I am doing something with it anyway, so I think it's all good.
Right. Yeah. This is one of the few righteous uses of that because you're not throwing the data set away. That's the wrong way to use it. So this is like in the best practice thing. I think we call this out specifically as the valid use of this.
The one good way. Yep. So we're good there. And what I'm going to do is I got to copy this table name. So we're going to go out there to the data preserver record table. And what we're saying is go out there into the data preserver record table, look to see, is there a record? And let me see what I called that. Because we've got slightly different columns now. Table preserver, just table preserver. Okay. So look to see, are there any records already associated with this table preserver for this table sys_id? And if there are, we're going to update it.
This is where you hope you get all your field names correct.
I certainly hope so.
I've done this so many times it gets... you really start to think of ways to put your field names into arrays or something so it makes it easier to upgrade later.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Now I'm going to come back to this generate payload in just a second because that's where there's a little bit of interesting magic happening. Table preserver. Let me just do this.
I mean, I've gotten to the point where when I write a script include and I'm going to be doing glide record queries, I put the table names up in the initialize, like this dot record table. And I just reference them as this dot record table throughout. And if I ever do need to change it, which has happened more frequently than I care to admit, I just change it once at the top of the script include. I still need to do the field modifications if there exist any, but at least I don't have to worry about chasing down table names throughout 1,500 line script includes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Some may argue it's just a search and replace. I say, well, this actually, to me, helps with readability.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the first thing I did here was in my first pass through, I did this thing called gs.unloadRecord.xml, which was something I found in some script somewhere in the platform, and it's not documented anywhere. So I discarded it. So we're not going to actually use that, and I doubt it would even work in a scoped app. It was cool, though, because what it did is it gave us the equivalent of if you do it was very similar to an unload record, and it was very easy to just unload something. So instead, I created a simple glide record to object JSON converter thingy. That's the technical term for it. And that's what we're going to use. So in this case, I'm going to build a payload. I'm going to say we're going to start with an empty object. The table is the glide record table name. The fields are this thing called gr.object, which I'm going to build next. And then finally, we return json.stringify. We pass in a null, and then we pass in a 4 to pretty print it, which is something that, Chuck, you actually emailed us about the other day. And I think we discovered that at basically the same time because it's super cool.
It makes a pretty stringify rather than a single line. You could put a number of spaces is what that represents, or you could put a /T to make it a tab. And I have been looking for this since I started doing JavaScript notation. I want to see the object pretty. Because in PHP, I think there was a print_r function that would do this. And I've been missing that since my PHP days about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. So then what I'm doing, gr.object, I'm passing in a glide record. I'm saying turn this glide record into an object. And we actually talked about this on Slack just the other day too. So this was very timely. This is the global version. So I need to change this into a scoped compatible version of this. So we're just iterating over this as an array. We're saying get all of the elements from the glide record. And then we're going to pull out the information about those elements and then build out an object. So for every element.
Wait a minute. Talk about the scope thing again, because what does get elements return? Does it return a Java array or does it return a JavaScript array?
Yes. So what happens, it actually in a global application returns an array list. And what you have to do is you have to do this weird, very Java-y thing where you say elements.size and then get this index.
Right. I recognize that.
Yep. In the scoped version of this, it actually just returns a JavaScript array.
So it's smart enough to know whether you're in a scoped app or not. You don't have to do the J to JS thing.
Well, I think more accurately, it's different. I believe it's just a completely different API behind the scenes. So there's a scoped glide element, something or another. I don't. Corey's probably shaking his fist at us right now, but there's.
I'm watching the chat. If he says something, I'll.
Yes, but essentially, I'm fairly confident there are two versions of the Java code. One for scoped apps, and that's what we're calling here, and that's why we're getting a JavaScript representation of it.
Cool.
So again, just to very briefly summarize what this is doing: getting all the fields from the object or from the glide record, and then turning it into an object. We return this to generate payload, and then because it's just a plain JavaScript object, we can run stringify on it and get a nice JSON string. So that's ultimately our goal. So let me just double check, see if I'm missing anything here. I don't see anything missing from what I've done. So to see if this works, before we try to actually do anything, I'm going to see if I can get this to work in a background script. And this is a weird thing. I can triple click on this API name and I can copy it. So I don't know what makes you be able to copy things and not. But weird.
Oh, wait a minute. That should have defaulted.
I might not be on the latest version.
Application picker?
That's a possibility too.
That you get two of them. Okay. Now, this is my favorite trick here, is scripts background will default to your scoped app. One of them is global.
There we go.
I love that feature.
So now I can do this. I can save our DPB equals new data preserver backup. And what I want to do is I want to pass in the sysid of a preserver. Except I haven't actually created a preserver yet, so I need to do that. So let me do this. I'm going to add a related list for this. And so we can actually see the preservers that are associated with this app. And I'm going to select the source table. And you'll notice that I can see every source table in the whole system. One of the things I want to do before we finish today, because we're probably not going to be able to implement everything, is show you how you can actually limit this list. There's a cool thing you can do with a script include. But this, I'm going to select the table because I know what table I want. Notice also it would be nice to have a good display value, so that's a good thing to do.
I was on you about that earlier.
Yep, you were. You absolutely were. So at this point, I've got a preserver. I'm going to copy the sysid, and I'm going to pass that in here. And then what I'm going to do is say backup records. And if this works, I will be shocked because that was a lot of code copying. But if it works, no, it didn't. So what's it doing? DPB. The very simplest of things. Did I not type that correctly? Yeah, I'm a little dyslexic, I think. Here we go. And invalid table name null. So what's that doing? Sorry.
You got a table, this table or something that's not quite right. Did it give you a line number?
Yeah, so let's see here. It is on line. It doesn't give us a line number. Oh, yeah, it does. Line 14. So let's look at line 14.
Script include?
Yeah, so when I do this dot table equals this dot preserver dot get value table, it doesn't like that. So either preserver is not anything.
Right. It's not returning the GR record.
Or
Josh. You're in Istanbul here, right?
Yes, I am. Oh man, I'm so excited right now.
First official show off of the new debugger.
I am so excited right now. Okay, so
Like a kid with a Christmas present.
This was actually not in the plan, but I guess we can say, yeah, we can say now, like all those times I was doing FlightAware, I was quietly using a Istanbul instance, and I couldn't actually show any Istanbul features. So I wanted so badly to show the script debugger because we weren't in early access yet. But.
All right, so Josh, what did you do? You double clicked or triple clicked a line?
Yeah. So all I did is I just single clicked. So you notice a little chevron there, and when I click it, it actually selects that it sets a breakpoint on that line.
Okay.
So that's there.
Can I recommend you set it on line 5? That way you can drill into the get preserver method.
I certainly can. I can do it on line 5.
The damage has already been done. That's my.
Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, if the issue is in the get preserver, you're absolutely right. So, and then the thing I did is I just did file and then launch script debugger, and that pulls this up.
Right. You have to, like, if your script, if that window is not up, that breakpoint will silently be passed. So you kind of have to have all this stuff defined at the same time.
Yeah. So now I'm going to come here. I'm going to click run. Oh, transaction paused at breakpoint, and here we go. So we can take a look at some of the things that we've got going on. We can look at here. We've got a preserver sysID, so that's good. We actually know that we have a sysID. And the next thing I can do is I can say step over. Actually, I probably should have stepped in there, but that's okay. So let me just let this run, and I'm going to go back and redo that.
You can still check and see if you had a decent object returned.
I just want to step in. So we're going to step in, and now we're in our get preserver, and we can continue to step into this method, and we can look at all of the things that are here. Okay. So right now we don't have a GR yet. That's expected. Let's keep going. Now we do have a glide record.
A scoped glide record.
Yes. And then
that's probably how Get Elements knows the difference.
Yeah. That's a good point. And now we are inside of our if. So we know that we're actually returning one of these. So that's good.
Okay.
So we're back up to here. Now we're going to our set table. Let's see what that does. And what we want to look at now is, what is this dot table?
This dot preserver as well.
So do you need to, up at the top, do you need to declare those fields in your script include before you use them?
No. So because it's an object, we can just do this dot, and that will that's fine. What I think I must be missing is, I don't know, maybe I didn't call it table. Did I call it source table?
I think it was.
Yeah, let's look at the table preserver record.
Data model says
it is source table. That's why.
You get a big fat null.
So we were just getting nothing there. So let's try this again. Back. Let's run it. And we've gotten further. So found 7 records. I did have some debugging logging going on. There was security restricted this time because of the fact that we didn't yet have the scope permission set up. So I'm just going to run this one more time. Now we have the scope. Found existing record, updating it. So theoretically, if this does what I think it did, we should have records there. Let's go take a look. Oops. Server records, there's a bunch of stuff. Cool. So we effectively were able to convert this thing into a scoped version of what we did the first time. And what this did is it ran through all of the tables in this XORBC RPM rental table, and it turned them into this JSON representation. So that worked. It didn't set our display value. So I think that I must have an error when we're setting our display value. It may be because I don't have a display value. Well, why would that be?
Display value on the rental table?
Yeah.
That could be.
Scroll up a tiny bit there, if you please. So,
I don't think, you know what we can do to try this or to test this out is I will just create another table preserver.
Okay. On a different table?
Yeah, I'm just going to create it on a different table. And in this case, even though, whoa, what did I do there? Well, that's weird. Oh, I know why. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, right.
So, so let's create a new one, and we're going to create this on, how about do now? Oh, I don't have one in here. I'll just do it on the incident table. How's that? We'll create on the incident table and see what happens.
We know incident has a display value.
Mm-hmm. And so I'll go ahead and copy that sysid, and we'll go run this in the background, and we should get more data. Creating. Cool. So now let's go back and take a look at our records. Yeah, that worked. So this is pulling in the incidents. So that's all good. This is working. Now, because we're running, we don't have a ton of time left. So I guess I'll put out to a poll for you two as to what you think we should continue. I can talk about the code that actually restores this record, which does a couple of things. Nothing too crazy, but it goes through and it basically goes through the process of recreating the records after they've been deleted. Mm-hmm. I could implement UI actions that do this, but that's pretty boring, I think. Or I could actually talk about the special script include that limits the list of tables to keep it specific to the application for the preserver.
Let's start with the restore procedure part and see if we can get into the table limiter if we've got time.
So how about this? If you guys are, so next week, I'm going to be out. We're having a production meeting on the air. Next week I'm going to be out. If you guys want to, if you guys want to like go forward with this, the two of you can go forward with this. Do you want to just kind of take it, 10 or 10 more minutes, and then we'll like wherever it stops, you guys just bring it the rest of the way home next week?
Yeah, sure. I'm good with that. So with that, yeah, I guess what I'll do is I'll talk about the restore code then, because I think that's a little bit more useful. The other thing's an edge case, but it's one that we can talk about later. So in this case, I have chosen to separate my application logic into several script includes. So I have my data preserver backup, and I've got a couple of sort of utility methods in here, and I want to keep them specific to this. So I also have a script include called data preserver restore, and that's what I create now. Oh, there's something really weird going on there. There we go. Okay. Let me pull this up on the hidden special window over to my right.
I'm so glad we got to use the debugger.
Oh, me too. I need to start remembering to use that.
I know. My brain was ready to start sticking in GS debug statements. Like, oh, no. Thank you, Dave.
The the directness, that's available when you have kind of a functioning debugger, because the debugger we had before, in its best day was kind of 40% operational, right? And this one is so functional, it's basically everything that you want. I have yet to have a hiccup in anything I've tried with it.
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. So this thing. The first thing that we want to do is create this method. Basically, all this does is it takes in one of those records in that record table, and it restores it. This is the first approach that I took. It was 2 lines of code. It was super cool. It went out there and it did this thing called glide loader. But similar to the other thing I showed you at the beginning, you can find this out there if you Google for it, but it's not documented, and I'm 99.9% sure it will not work in a scoped app. So I went the route of actually implementing this for myself. And the way this starts is we go out there and we say we've got the record. In this case, we've got to update this because we have a new field name. We're taking that string that's in the payload field and we're turning it into an object. We're pulling out the table and the sysid so that we can work with those. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and do some stuff in the table that this is associated with. So we're going to say, look at, what table did this record come from? We're going to set auto sys fields to false, and this makes sure that we don't try to set, sys created on, sys updated by, created by, any of that stuff. We're basically telling the glide record, don't set any of those automatic fields. We're telling it, don't run any business rules. And I don't think that'll matter anyway, because we don't have business rules on this table, but this basically ensures that none of that's happening behind the scenes. So that's the first thing. Then I'm going to run this bit of code that says, if it's there, so if it's there, go ahead and do this thing called merge object to glide record and do an update. Otherwise, do merge glide record to object and then do an insert. I wrote this because I didn't like having the same code copied, like this whole block of things copied twice. But anyway.
You do know that an update will do an insert if the record is not there.
I do, and I just feel really bad about doing that because I feel like it obscures what my code is doing. But that's just the way I feel.
Okay. This is a perennial topic in the SNDev Slack channel is explicit intent versus implicit intent of code.
Yeah.
I almost always will err on the side of whatever makes it most obvious to the poor schmuck who has to inherit the code.
Yeah,
and that 9 times out of 10, that's usually you.
That's you. Yeah, that's you next week.
Yes, indeed. So what this thing does is merge objects to glide record is it takes in an object and it takes in a glide record, and it says spin through all the objects or spin through all the fields in the object and then set them in the glide record. We do this thing called object.hasOwnProperty field just to make sure that the thing we're iterating over, because we're doing a for in loop, we have to make sure that
that's a good idea.
Actually in there.
In case,
and then if
that could prevent you from doing a data model thing, because if you're storing an incident record and somebody deleted u_oopsie, you're not going to try and restore it when it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So now what we're saying is if the field is sysid, we want to treat it special. We want to do this thing called gr.setNewGUID and pass in the sysid value. And this is how we're actually able to set the sysid manually instead of the system setting it.
Interesting. You're doing that before or after the insert and update?
So this is before. So I'm doing, this is in the merge operation. So I've got a glide record already. I'm doing the merge. And as part of that merge, I'm doing this set. Now, I'm doing this in both cases. I'm doing this on insert and update. I don't think it actually matters because it's not changing, but I didn't bother to change that. And then if it's not the sysid, I'm saying just gr.setValue on this field and set this value, and that's it. So
that's when magic happens.
Yep, indeed. So theoretically now we have, with this restore single record, the ability to pass in one of those things and actually restore it to whatever target table it came from. Let's see, we've got 8 minutes. So I'm just going to paste 3 other methods in here and speak to or 2 other methods in here and speak to them briefly, but we're not going to fully implement them just in the interest of time or talk about, fixing them. So I've got this thing called restore all records given a preserver. And what this does is it says, go out there, look for a preserver, look for all the records associated with the preserver, and then call our restore single record method. So we're saying, go through that. And then we've got restore all preservers, which is a way to say, go and look for every preserver and then do a restore all records on every preserver. So we're basically here to say that.
Quickly update your table names in those 2?
Yeah, let me do that. If I can remember them, I can't. So table preserver. There we go. And if I do this, I think I can remember how this works. There we go. The project is just a project.
Application name?
Source application.
Source application.
Yeah, source application should be it.
And u_preserver was?
And u_preserver should be table preserver. And I'm not going to test these right now because we can test this thing with a single record just to prove that it works. So I think that'll do it. Just to make things actually better, I'm just going to say application here.
Good idea.
We've already established that we're changing our naming convention. So there we go. So application get value. So again, restore all preservers, goes through all the preservers, restores all the records, which goes through and does a single record restore on every record that it finds. So to test this, let's go and go into our records table, and we're just going to pick one. Let's pick incident ending in 003. Copy that URL, and I'm going to go and delete that incident. Now, there's an interesting side note here. Because we only have a preserver set up on the incident itself, we'll restore the basic incident, but it's not going to restore everything because, let's see, is this the one? Here we go. Because anything sort of related records, I guess this doesn't have an SLA, so maybe this will be okay. There's probably not much information associated with this, but one of the key things just is that you have to set up a preserver for each table that is sort of participating in this whole data model.
Good point.
So
in some cases, when you do the delete, even if it's a manual delete, it's going to cascade. So you may delete the incident. It goes, well, I don't need these SLAs or these approvals anymore, so I'll delete those for you automatically. And now when you go to restore, you're like, you've only got partial information back.
Yep, absolutely. Now, when you're in a actual scoped application, this shouldn't be terribly difficult. And one of the things in the final version of the app is we have this thing called, actually, I don't want that up there. I want to put this into this. Oh, I know what I got to do. Okay, bear with me here. Because we're actually passing a glide record at this point.
Gotta go get one.
Yep. So we're going to get a new glide record, and I'm going to just naively assume that this is actually working because I know it's there already. So gr.get.
You want to do a glide record on the incident table?
Yeah.
You have empty quotes in there.
Yeah, sorry, this is taking a second. And actually what I have to do is I have to do a glide record on the preserver record itself.
Oh.
My browser keeps locking up for some reason right now. It doesn't like me. Come on, copy sysid. There we go. Okay. And what's that table?
X underscore something.
Yeah. Like you said, probably not a bad idea to put these in variables somewhere to make it a little easier. So we're getting our preserver record. We're passing it into this restore single record. If this works, we should see, let me just go back to our incident list first. We should see the incident come back. There's nothing there ending in 0003 except for the one that has 2 in it. That's not the one we would care about. So we'll click that.
And invalid glider no thrown error.
But that might be okay because that looks like it's some sort of downstream. What is that doing? Workflow timer.
Score. Oh, you have analytics.
Huh. So that's not related to us. That's something else.
Yeah, let's see if that's back.
It is not back, but
yeah, it does look like something canceled the transaction, doesn't it?
Let me. You know what it was? So access to. Yeah. So we have cross-scope policy issues. Oh, that's interesting.
That's right. Incident. We have not opened up incident to allow out of scope. Right. Yep. Yeah.
But more interestingly, notice we have security restricted to set workflow. So it looks like we can't turn off workflow in a scoped app.
I wonder if it's part and parcel with the other one, though.
Could be.
So let's go flip the switch on incident real quick and see if it makes a difference. Right click, configure table. Switch your scope. Scope picker.
There we go.
Here.
I'm lazy. So we can create according to this. So what else does that say? So set value from scope has been refused. So is set value also not?
Oh, set value is available.
Should be. Write operation on table incident was granted and added to the data preserver. Let's run that again. Now it's just down to that.
Okay. Oh, look at
so let's see. So we are exactly at 5:30. So you guys make the call. Do you want to end this on a cliffhanger and end right here and come back at exactly this point, or do you want to wrestle this one before we adjourn. I sort of always hate to end on a.
You too.
I prefer to end on a victory, however small.
I am good with continuing on, and we're going into bonus time now.
Okay. Yeah, let's see if we can just figure out this part of the cross scope policy. Then I think we can get to a good ending point.
Yeah, I agree. So I wonder, is there anything, because of the fact that we're initiating this from background script, if that's maybe not doing the necessary things to generate our, I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here.
The right scope, though.
Yeah, we are in the right scope. So what other things can we do? We can, let me read that one more time. So set value. Let's just make sure the code even works or makes sense. Let me just take a look at this again. And I mean, this is essentially copying and pasting. So we know that we, you know what? Let's do this. Let's try this on a non-incident record just to see what happens on something that's not an incident. Because I want to see if maybe it has something to do with the fact that we're talking to a global app. So let's go back here. PD records. And
Pretty open global app.
Yeah, it should be. And I mean, it's something that you repeat, very often you'll see integrations built against the incident table, things like that. So I would think that would be pretty common. But let's just pick one of these. So we're going to pick this rental property. Let me just filter it down to that so we can focus on it. And we're going to go and delete it. And then a new tab. So it's the one with the sysid of that. So there it is. We'll go ahead and delete this record.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gone, as it should be. And now if we copy the sysid of the backup record, and we'll go and put this into our background script. Interesting. So again, set workflow and set value are not happy with us.
So it's the actual. Do we need to create a scoped load ride?
It actually restored.
Is the application enforcing this, or is it just what's the other one? Monitor it. No, go to the application record for your new or for the rental property.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, let me switch over to that.
I want to see what the application record says for. It's just tracking. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's pretty weird.
Go back. If we look, can you run your background script one more time?
Yeah.
So it'll just be essentially a no-op because it's still there. But so access to API set value, and notice that it's. So here's the thing. Look at that. Notice that it's not every value. It's two specific values.
You're right.
It's mod count and it's sys tags. Sys mod count and sys tags. So I think what we're seeing there is the fact that those are in the preserver, but they're for some reason those probably have a different level of access control than the rest of Glide record. So that's why it came back.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. So is there a field level?
Those are probably on the global table. I don't know. That's a good question.
All right. I think this maybe, so let's end on this cliffhanger, which is, it kind of works, but we have an open research question, which is what's special about those couple fields?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you guys come back, you can address that and then kind of carry this thing through to the bitter end. How about that?
Okay. Yep. I like it. And so we do have success in that we did restore the record. So we just have to look at those other weird fields later.
Yeah. And this is an extremely interesting case, right? This is one of those things where, the things, the scoped app protections are one of the things that it makes you have to really architect very well what you're doing here, right? You have to think a lot about this because, as you say, everything about this is interacting cross scope. In fact, it does, everything it does is going to be cross scope, right?
Right.
Yeah.
By definition, it's not doing anything in its own scope. It's doing only things across other scopes. So you kind of had that interesting decision. Like you said, there is a certain case to be made for it being in global because of that aspect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then you lose all the packageability, you lose the source controllability. So it's really this is a really interesting application for those levels of decision.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we can talk about later is, really assessing what's the impact of this. So do we, and let me just stop sharing here while I'm doing this, but what's the impact of this? Do we actually care that we don't have the ability to set the sysmod count? I don't think we care about systags because that would probably be, set up some other way.
Demo data, I wouldn't care about sysmod count. That's just my, do I really care if an incident's been modified 27 times or one time when I'm test data? Unless you've got some script that's checking against that. But it's usually, did sysmod count change?
Yeah. So if those are the only two fields, it feels a little janky, but we could potentially just go in there and put an if statement.
I think this might be just a disclaimer level thing. Mm-hmm. So if it turns out that there's just a hard limit that those are never restorable. Right. So let's just say worst case scenario, you can never do that. Then that just becomes a kind of a caveat that you have to tell people, which is, by the way, if the records you're restoring have a dependency, if tags and mod count are important to you, this is going to be problematic. And here's why.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
I can kind of see, for every use case you and I have thought about, that's not, no one cares. Right. But like Chuck said, there may conceivably, if you were backing up incident, or you were backing up some intrinsic core system, there may very well be logic that exists on that. Something in kind of the core chain, there may be a reason why somebody's looking and says a change can only change state X number of times or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Interesting stuff.
Research and find out.
Yeah, I regret I will not be able to be here next week. However, a quick plug, if you are one of our friends in the UK, I will be presenting at the London Developer Meetup next Wednesday, and then I and some of my colleagues will be at the London Hackathon next Thursday. So,
awesome!
I will see you there.
So,
all right,
beer ratings.
Josh, what do you got?
My favorite beers. I think it's 4.5. It's a tasty stout.
Chuck, how's your apple cider?
It's fall. It's warm apple cider. Need I say more? It's comfort food.
My dead ringer. I honestly thought, because I think one of the first times I had it, I had a Dale's Pale Ale and then this, and it just tasted off. And but it still tastes off. It tastes like a little soy saucy. I may have a bad. There may have been a bad chain of custody somewhere in here. It may have sat in a hot truck that it shouldn't have been. But I've not been digging the 6. I'm gonna give it 2.75. I think that's the lowest one I've ever given anything.
Ouch.
Since we've been in here. So, all right, gentlemen. Thank you everybody for watching. Let's take one last check. So John Caruso has been asking a little about cross-scope stuff. Talking a little about runtime access checking.
He's saying when you set that application, the cross-checking that we checked at the end, it said, is it just tracking or is it enforcing? He was saying, what's the difference? What happens when you set it to none? Is it not doing any cross? Oh, by the way, you've got screen still locked to Josh, but he's saying, if you set it to none, does it not do any cross-scope API checking at all? Because we know what tracking does. That just says, hey, I noted it, but I'm going to fix it for you. Enforcing says, I noted it and I'm not going to fix it. You need to set this explicitly. But what does none do? According to the documentation, he says it's just going to ignore your cross-scope checking. So it's almost like you don't need those checkboxes on the tables.
Interesting. So, but I would assume it's only for the app that you're building, right? So at that point, anything else has free reign over this application, but not the other way around.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for another live coding happy hour. Thank you, gentlemen. This is so by the time we're done with this, I think this is going to be a nice, interesting project. So this is absolutely, Josh, you're going to kind of publish it out there, and this is, I think, particularly for people who do what we do, it's going to be a valuable thing. Like this is the classic an itch that we have that we're scratching here because, like we said, this happens to us all the time. So,
and I'm using it for my first real webinar next week.
All right. Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Josh and Chuck, for being involved, and we will see you all next time.
All right. See you
All right.
guys. Bye.
Bye.